the idea that there would be a shutting down of conservative voices, that's not what a college campus is made to do. And I don't know of any that start out to do that. Okay, but a college campus is a place, it's a marketplace of ideas and exploring ideas. It became more than that. It became politicized. Um, when Turning Point came to the University of Georgia's campus, 2 weeks before, there had been, I think it was somebody who was running for senator, governor, or whatever, showed up in town, sponsored by Turning Point, but they weren't at the university. They were at the Civic Center. And now, when you're in a college setting, is usually when you get the most exposure to those kinds of ideas. But they had it at the Civic Center, and I told my students, I will give you extra credit if you go. And I want you to, if it means, if giving you a point of extra credit for going and writing a paper about it means that you get to see that, which is my end up goal, then I don't mind doing that. So I told them they could get extra credit. They went and sort of came back. Their papers showed that they were kind of shell-shocked. In fact, two of my students who did not know each other said to me, when they were telling me about the experience, they had written the papers and submitted them, but they said, I was just sort of shocked. I grew up around people, and I thought this would be like Old Home Week. This is literally going to be the easiest extra credit I have ever done. Because, like, folks, I know this territory. And I said, well, what happened? He said, everything I had ever heard about who Democrats were. He said, both of them said the same thing. I come from a Democratic or Republican town. I grew up with these folks. They're in my family, my friends, everybody. This is what I'm surrounded by. This is why this was so comfortable for me that I knew this was going to be fine. But I got there, and everything that I had always been told about how Democrats were was what I saw these Republican folks doing. Just mean stuff, like calling people out of the audience that were doing nothing but minding their business and talking bad about them, embarrassing them from the stage and stuff like that. They said, I don't know in good conscience if I can change believe what I believed before, because I now know different, which is the scary thing, and why you see them now going after universities, because that experience broadens you and teaches you things that you may not have known before. And that's a threat to somebody who wants to keep the status quo. So these are going to be people, these students, don't just see yourself as a student. This is just one chapter in your life. You're going to be a participating, voting member of society. And I don't care how you vote. This is America. You get to vote however you want to. But being able to be exposed to ideas that help you make that decision on an informed basis is important. So that was a really, for them, life-altering event, for them to see what they had been exposed to for their entire lives changed so differently by what they saw in real life going on that stage.
Dr. Cori Bazemore-James of Seneca Nation serves as Assistant Vice Provost of the Graduate School Diversity Office and affiliate faculty in the Higher Education Program at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. She is also a consultant and trainer for strategic diversity initiatives. Cori received both her PhD and her higher education and MS in Industrial Organizational Psychology from the University of Georgia and her BA in Psychology from the University of South Dakota. She has worked in many functional areas in higher education and has served on several local and national boards and leadership roles. Cori's research centers Indigenous knowledge and support to magnify the work of Indigenous students and staff in historically white institutions. Her proudest professional accomplishments include publications from her award-winning research, founding the ACPA Indigenous Student Affairs Network, and leading the development of the first Council for the Advancement of Standards in Higher Education, CAS, Standards for Indigenous Student Affairs. Welcome, Dr. Bazemore-James. Welcome to another episode of Quilted Hearts Chats. How you doing, Aunt Donnie?
I'm great. Cori's here. I'm fine.
Yes, she is. We are, our guest today is a woman who is amazing, a phenomenal woman. She has done so much in her career and a lot of research making sure that there are standards within the higher education of people of color, particularly the group of Native Americans that either are in higher institutions, or some of the things that she's done is also direct some information on how getting there from K through 12 to get to the place where the higher education actually is something that's attainable and matters. So we would like to introduce our guest, which is Dr. Cori Bazemore-James from the University of Minnesota, and she is the Vice Provost of the Diversity Affairs Department. Did I say Vice Provost or was it Associate Provost?
Assistant Vice Provost of Graduate School.
Say that again, Cori, for us. Vice Provost for
the Graduate School Diversity Office.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So
it's a mouthful.
And we want to welcome the Assistant Vice Provost of the Graduate School Diversity Office within the Graduate School at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, Dr. Cori Bazemore-James. Welcome to the show, Cori, Dr. Bazemore.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Cori is great.
I think I took that liberty because I read that in the letter that you wrote to your team when you became the Vice Provost. So you said, call me Cori.
Okay, good. Yes, definitely.
Thanks for coming to our show. We are really excited to have you talk to us about how you got to this point and why your education where your education has led you and how you're giving back to higher education as well. And to find out what things were helpful to you or the things that were impasses that we've been working to try and minimize for future students coming into our schools.
Absolutely. Dawn was on my dissertation committee, so I'm forever, ever grateful to Dawn for all the support through my graduate education. I got my start at the University of South Dakota. I was an undergraduate student there in the psych department. And at the time, there were very strong racial tensions between Native and white folks at the U. There were very small numbers of other students of color that just kind of disappeared. It was so small that the entire campus size was maybe about 6,000 to 8,000 students. It's pretty small. But there were very clear racial tensions, really in that state, but also in that college town. And we had a strong Native community there, mostly Lakota community. I'm Seneca Nation of Western New York, but I grew up in South Dakota. And I'm mixed race, so I am white and Native. And so for my brother and I, it was always a choice, basically, a forced choice, one or the other. You couldn't just be both. And I identified more strongly with my Native side. We're very active in our Native community and ceremony. And at the University of South Dakota, I served as the president of the Native American Student Club one year. I was very active in Native community, and it was very clear kind of the not quite said hidden curriculum around where Native students belonged on campus was a Native American Center and the Native Student Club, and that was it. You really weren't welcome anywhere else. But I was one to make waves here and there. And I, for instance, I joined the student council, the student government. There was a point where they came around and were asking the different diverse student orgs if there was any interest in joining student government. They're looking for diversity. So I ended up getting on. I was the one person that they welcomed on, and it just so happened they were looking for diversity because their one Black member was leaving. So they just needed their token one person to be there, not to listen to that voice. They were very upset often when I would speak up, and they would use Robert's rules against me to go the whole room around, would scream at me, telling me I was calling them racist. when I wasn't. I was, come up with ideas around, we don't have a lot of students who show up to our meetings. We especially don't have students of color showing up to our meetings. What are ways that we can be more inviting? And that turned into, you're calling us racist. And so it was a very clear.
Oh my gosh, one or the other.
Yeah. It was very clear where you belonged and where you didn't. And there was no central service supporting Native students. We had TRIO, which served a lot of our Native students, but not all of, myself included. We didn't qualify. In the psych department where I was, there was, a contingent space for Native psych majors, and the med school had space for students in med school and pre-med majors, but there wasn't anything unifying all of us. And so when I was a junior, I had been working at the laundromat in town, and the laundromat closed, and I was desperately seeking work. And our dean of students at the time, a really wonderful ally dean of students, decided to create an Office of Native Student Services because our Native student retention rate at the time was about 24%, and nationally it was about 36%. So even as bad as it was nationally, we were really struggling in that space. But they didn't necessarily know who to hire for creating this center. They ended up hiring our spiritual leader, Jean Thinelk, who is an amazing human being, and also was like,
wait, when you say our spiritual leader, who is our?
The Lakota community.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, he's our spiritual leader for the Lakota community and the ceremonies that we participated in that town. And he was amazing. Students loved him. Very grandpa kind of relationship that he had with students. And then they hired me as a student to help co-create this office. I was a junior. He was, his background is in alcohol and drug abuse studies, and neither of us had higher ed student affairs background whatsoever. And it was pretty evident there was something that we didn't know, but we didn't know what we didn't know. That other student affairs folks knew about. We were just kind of thrown in there and said, you have a $600 budget and you need to fix our retention problem.
$600 budget? Is that what you said? $600 budget.
Yep.
$600. How much was the retention? What did they want? 5 more students?
I don't know if they even gave us a number. Jean would have knew that, but all we knew was fix it. It's kind of, which felt reminiscent to, fix the Indian problem in the boarding school era of our country. And so it was like, yeesh, like, what does that mean? Why did you choose us in particular? Like, what about, is it just because we're Native? Or is there something that, because we don't have this background to know how to do this, but it was just kind of assumed that we would. And it was also the university run by non-Native folks, mostly white folks, kind of telling us what to do and how to do it. And we were having to push back and say, if we're doing this work, we're not doing it on your behalf. We're doing it on behalf of the tribes. There's 9 tribes in our state. And if we're doing this work, it's about telling the tribes, we're going to take care of your greatest resource, your youth. We're going to make sure they come out of this place whole and not just in debt and traumatized from whatever they experience here. And so that's where we really felt obligated, was to the tribes, and to work with, or sometimes battle with, the institution around how do we need to provide support for Native students that's appropriate. And what we were told different rules, like we couldn't communicate with other institutions in the region who also had these types of offices because they were so worried about fierce competition in the recruitment space. Like, are we going to give away some sort of secrets that we clearly didn't have because we were struggling? But we did anyway. We had to, because that's who we are as Native people. We help each other. We're a community. And we all care about the well-being of Native students everywhere, not just the ones that come to our institution. So we connected with other institutions. We brought together a network. Basically, all those individual units across campus that were serving students weren't talking to each other about how and why and where they're doing their programming. And so we brought everyone together to make sure we're on one calendar and no one's calendaring on top of each other, and that we're being intentional about how we serve students in a broader way. And we were able to talk about, so-and-so students struggling over here. We need to make sure someone over here supports them. Well, so-and-so is struggling with this. Okay, make sure their mentor steps up and is connecting with them. So we were really intentional in kind of a behind the scenes way of serving the students. And then we were just asking the students a lot about what their needs were and what their wants were. And you know, for me, being a traditional age student, not a parent, I was surprised to learn that one of the biggest material needs of our students was diapers. And I would have never knew that if I hadn't asked, you know, and we couldn't outright buy diapers for students. So we would come up with programming like grocery bingo. And we would have stacks of boxes of diapers that students would win at grocery bingo, and laundry detergent. I think that was the other big one. But we were creative in trying to serve the students in the ways that we could, how. And we were able to increase that retention rate from 24% to 74% in 1 year.
Wow. That is amazing. Amazing.
Sorry. What?
Just a little listening and a little caring, and a little providing facts to people so they can make decisions. And but 50% is that? 50% more population.
Yeah. I mean, it's just listening to them, you know, because nobody ever listens to them. No one asks them the questions, and then no one listens to them.
Well, you only ask questions if you care.
Mm-hmm. And we cared. That was
and this is it's really important for me to say this here, because I'm having a hard time keeping it together, because people keep trying to make this a huge issue. It's only a huge issue if you make it a huge issue. It's not a huge issue like people have in their heads. This took somebody giving $600 to two people with no background and what they were asking you to do. And your biggest asset was that you cared about these people.
Exactly.
And they even tried to limit some of the ways in which you could do that, because you knew it made sense, especially given your cultural background where you care about everything, right? You care about all people like that. To reach out to others and say, what have you got going on? Is there some way we can help? Is there some way you can help us? I mean, which you would have thought especially with $600, would be something they would urge you to do.
Right.
And despite all of that, you ended up increasing the retention rate from 24 to 76, and that's a 300% increase. And this is despite all of that other nonsense. So but the thing that you had as an asset was that you cared about these people. And what do? The first thing we do to people that we care about is we listen to what it is they have to say. That made all the difference in the world, just knowing somebody cared and acted on the basis of that. Mind blowing. Oh my God. Okay, I'll try to be better and hold it together. But your story, and I didn't even know this when I was on your dissertation committee, when you were in undergraduate school, and then this is what you were bringing with you to graduate school when I met you. I would have loved you even more if that was
Well, you know what? Another magical thing was that came from that we had no expectation, was that, like I said, Native students felt very much like they're limited in where they can go on campus. And for the most part, most of us kind of followed that because we wanted to be safe. But I think by creating this really solid home space for them in Native Student Services, where they felt really loved and cared about and heard and affirmed, they started infiltrating all of those other campus spaces. They were going on study abroad for the first time. They were joining Greek life for the first. One of our students became president of his fraternity, let alone join Greek life. Yeah, like all of a sudden, and they became president of the Student Government Association, that very same association that basically said I wasn't allowed to speak. So it was like, that was really cool.
That is the power of love. And I don't want people to miss that. That is the power of loving and caring about people. They felt the confidence you gave them just by seeking community and creating it ended up making them feel like they had a platform to go out and give the contribution of themselves that benefited everybody to the rest of the community that they were a part of and supposedly treated just like everybody else. Oh my gosh, that is unbelievable. You ought to feel like you're walking on cloud nine, girl. Oh my God, what a difference that made.
it was very, very impactful, and definitely has led my trajectory in my career.
Oh, I bet.
And I thought, I went to grad school. Well, I first went to grad school having not visited. That was a big mistake. I always tell grad students at UGA, I did not visit. I got the call from my advisor and I said, yes, ma'am, I'm coming.
Oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
From South Dakota.
Yeah. Everyone at home
to Georgia.
concerned about me going to Georgia. Yeah. They were very concerned.
First it was a culture shock. Okay. Oh my God.
But it was good. Like, it was good to see another. I mean, a lot of my family's in Houston, Texas. I was born in Houston, so like I have some. I have some connections in the South. That's where you are, in Houston. Oh, that's great.
That's where I am. Mm-hmm.
So I've always had some connections. Great to go really live in the South as an adult. And I think I was only able to do that because my husband came with me, because I after I graduated my undergrad, I worked for 4 years at the University of South Dakota in TRIO and then in admissions, trying to decide what specifically I wanted to go to graduate school for, because I knew I wanted to go. Didn't know which. I wanted to go in psychology. That's my family legacy is clinical psychology. I knew I didn't want that one. That's one of the psychs. I ended up finally picking one and having the bravery to go to Georgia. I think because I had done a summer internship in Atlanta 1 year. It was a minority student summer internship. I got to work at the CDC. It was really amazing. Oh. And I found there was some small Native community in Atlanta and at the CDC. So I thought, oh, there will be some, smaller than what I used to, but there'll be some people. But when I got to the University of Georgia, I was there for 6 years total. With my first 3 years, I never met another Native student. That was really hard. That was harder than I realized. And it was hard because I couldn't always go home, for ceremonies, and like if people, very important people in my community passing away, and sometimes you can go back for it, sometimes you can't, or just the powwows and the social gatherings. So I felt very disconnected. And I was struggling because the psych program I chose didn't welcome me. It was, again, like my advisor was very welcoming, but everyone else was not. I was told, by my white male professors that they wanted me to come because they thought it would be neat to have an Indian. They never had an Indian in their program before.
Neat.
Don't act like you're Indian.
You're right.
Okay, don't be Indian. We just want to be able to know that you are.
Yeah. Yep.
This was what year?
This would have been 2012 when I went to grad school. And it was a lot of very combative experiences, mostly with faculty. I had some friends with some of the students, and other students I just felt like it just didn't feel like I belonged or was very welcome. And I just thought, that's just part of going to grad school. You just have to deal with that,
I'm going to stop you right there, because it's what you're saying is so rich until there's some parts that we just have to really emphasize for people, even when because they don't know. And that's the whole basis of our program, that people don't really understand what DEI is. And because they don't, because it's usually been introduced in some sort of political context that has a very different agenda to it, that's about divisiveness and getting votes. They don't understand it. And some people have understood it because somebody at work said you had to do it. But, that was sort of colored by the fact that what they felt like they had to do at work came through the filter of what they had heard about it in terms of politicians. And we know that we mostly grow up in homogeneous societies where even if we are exposed to people that are not like us, even in something like school, there's a reason there's a book called Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Because we know that even if you're there together, our homogeneous experience says you want to be with people who look like you. So when you say something, and there's a lot of that that's taken for granted, there are things that you're just saying that were issues for you, but people don't necessarily think of that as an issue because they live in a society where everything reflects them. So it's like a fish swimming in water. Okay, they just don't note it. So when you say things like, people dying and I couldn't get home for it, or you say, I didn't have a place or people to share these ceremonies with, I don't want you to just skip over that. Those are incredibly important cultural pieces for you. And this doesn't mean that everybody has to stop what they're doing and saying, okay, we're having a powwow now. That's not what you're talking about. What you're talking about is having access to those kinds of things, right? These as resources, and having a community that even if the resource wasn't available here, you have a community that lets you know how to get to those, right? And when you don't have that, and at the same time in a graduate program where this is not undergrad, this is a graduate program where you need the support of your graduate professors, because if you don't have it, you may not get out of that program that you're paying all that money for. And if their idea of having you is, oh, we just wanted to have a Native American, but anytime you bring Native American issues, all of a sudden it's like you're back in undergraduate school, you bring it up and you're called, somebody says, oh, you're calling us racist with this, sort of mentality. That's going to put you in a certain place that you just don't need to be for doing what graduate study does, which is to stretch your head in ways you did not ever think it could be stretched. That support system of just feeling comfortable where you are is extraordinarily important. Extraordinarily important. And I don't want people to think that when you say this, it's something they can just dismiss. Imagine never being able to have a church available to you if you grew up going to church all the time, right? And all of a sudden it was just out of your life and people are like, get over it. No. And it's not just the church, it's connected to so much else in your life. So I want people to understand that when you paint that picture that you're painting, and you're doing such a good job of doing it. When you paint that picture, I want them to be able to see themselves in that picture so they can understand why this was problematic for you. And it's not like you went there looking for this. It's just that once you got there and saw this is what it was not a comfortable situation. Yeah. Not that you were looking for all kinds of comfort in the world, right? You had lived undergraduate experience of not being comfortable and making that work. But what you ended up feeling, as far as I'm concerned, you should not have had to feel. And I don't want people to miss either the fact that this was happening through things that people said to you. And the reason that's important is because very often people say, well, I don't know what to do about DEI. What are we supposed to do? People talking to you one-on-one, that's not a government policy. Okay? That's nobody having to have a program. That's you talking to another human being. And if you care about that human being, there's certain things you just wouldn't say. I mean, would you really say, oh, we just wanted you because you're Native American? I don't think so. I mean, you don't even need to know the specifics of how you deal with Native American culture to know that's probably not a good thing to say. I mean, you think that, especially if you're a professor.
I got my black and my my Mexican or Mexican, exactly. They're not even from Mexico. It's just insane. But when did it turn for you? Because you said you were there for 6 years, right?
Yeah.
3 of the years you were really lonely. When did it turn?
Well, I was in a PhD program that was a master's along the way kind of thing. And I intended to do both of those degrees. But things were just getting more and more toxic and really tough to deal with. And I wasn't learning. I was having a hard time learning because I just couldn't engage with the materials because I was so depressed. Like it became harder and harder to physically be even in that building. And there was, I remember a time one of my faculty called me out because I had clearly not done the reading for the day. And they were having a conversation about the reading and I was just quiet. I was often called out for being quiet because it wasn't okay to be quiet, apparently. But in this case, I hadn't done the reading for the day. And my professor called me out in front of everyone, which is humiliating. And then I just said, can I talk to you after class? And we did. And I just started crying because I was like, I'm just so emotionally overwhelmed. I just can't engage right now. Is that like, I don't know what else to tell you. I just couldn't do it because I just can't engage with this material right now. And she was in shock, a white woman who was like, I don't know what to do with that. But that's the space I was in, and things were just kind of escalating. And when a particularly bad incident happened with one of my faculty, I just had to run away. And I went home to the University of South Dakota. It was the last weekend that my former students were putting on the university powwow. And so I wanted to go home for the powwow and just be with my students and be at this like joyous celebration of Native culture. And I came back and met with my advisor, and I was just like gushing over how wonderful and needed that was for me. And that was the first time she stopped me and said, maybe you are in the wrong program, which was like, what? Because she and I were fighting so hard for me to be there. But for her to say, maybe you are in the wrong program. I've never seen you be so happy about something. And like you are glowing in a way I've not seen. Maybe you need to be in higher education, which was funny because
to be in what?
In higher education.
In higher education.
Mm-hmm. Which was funny because the former supervisor, as I was leaving to go to grad school, said to me, you know, you belong in higher ed. You'll be back. And I was like, whatever. No, I won't. But she encouraged me to visit with faculty in the Student Affairs Higher Education program. And I immediately fell in love with that program and with the faculty. And that's where a lot of students of color were that were missing from where I was. I really found some solace and community with Black students at UGA. There was a student organization for students of color, which was basically all Black students and me. The one who stood out a little bit.
Did they tell you to go get some more Indians? Get some more Native Americans? I mean, did they tell you, is that what their mandate was? And they only had $300 because, you know, the Black people still have
it. But it was like, that was the turning point. That was the first main turning point, was in that program. I felt like they saw me, and they while they didn't understand everything, they didn't have the context of understanding Native people or serving Native students. They wanted to have the conversation, and they welcomed talking about DEI in every single course, not just the DEI course taught by the one Black professor. You know, so that was really big.
What's that?
I was allowed to focus my research in a qualitative direction, which my former program would not allow whatsoever. And as an Indigenous person, storytelling is data. You know, that is our data. That is our theory. And the other part was I finally met, not in my program, but I started meeting other Native students. It was around that same time. I basically mastered out of the first program, began the higher ed PhD program. My advisor too had also gotten me a doctoral internship in the Multicultural Services and Programs Office, which was full of amazing BIPOC folks doing amazing work. So that was a really healthy space to be in. And I started finally finding sporadically other Native students, which was, it started with 2 little baby freshmen from the Cherokee Nation. And it was, they were just baby freshmen, and I was like gushing over them, like, oh my God, finally. And they're like, who are you? We don't know. So we became fast friends. And by the end, my last year or so, there was 7 of us. Out of this ginormous university, there were 7 of us, most of us grad students. We were all going to be graduating around the same time. And we were trying to figure out, how do we create community for Native students here? We had one undergrad student who was trying to create a Native student organization. We were all supporting her in doing that. And we had some support from various faculty and staff who were very well-meaning, but didn't necessarily listen. They invited us to say, hey, you know, like, we have some room in our budget to support you. Do you want to join us in cultivating that? And I was like, yes. I thought I was being asked because of my background of working in Indigenous student affairs. That was my research area. That was my history of working at Native Student Services. And it felt again like a token situation. They didn't actually want to know what I had to offer. They just wanted to recreate the same kind of programming they always do for all students of color. And it usually starts with orientation at the library. And I was like, we've all been here. We're all closer to graduating than we are closer to, we know how to use the library. We don't need that. Mm-hmm. What we need is just like a monthly lunch. That's it. Just give us space and food and let us be together on a regular basis, just to create community. And for some reason, that was just too big of an ask. It was like mind blowing, like, I don't know how to do that. And it made no sense to me. And instead, they decided to call a meeting. I warned them, don't do this. Please don't do this. But they did anyway. did an open call to the entire university. Anyone who has any interest in the idea of supporting Native American students at UGA, let's come together with the Native students. And so it was a bunch of random people who knew nothing about how to support us, who thought it was neat to have Indians. You know, it was not about us. It was about them. It wasn't about what we need. I was telling them we're going to feel like zoo animals on display. That's not helpful to us. And that's exactly what it felt like. They just wanted us to be. Yeah, we have that every day. We don't need that. We don't need to participate in that on purpose. You know? And ultimately we turned down money that was offered to us to help create our community because we weren't being heard. They weren't listening. They didn't actually want to experiment with what it was that we said we needed. And so we just did it ourselves. We just got together often and supported each other. And we still to this day support each other through like being job references and you know, whatever, because we understood we just needed each other. And we just needed to support each other and give that love and care because none of us could get home as often as we needed to for our community gatherings and ceremonies.
Yeah. Let's go back to something, just 1 second. We were talking about when you were at South Dakota. They wanted to increase the Indigenous population of the school because they wanted the money. Because I'm under the belief that, I don't know if this is still true, somebody may have eaten away at it already, that if you are Indigenous to the country and on the rolls, then you can have your education will be paid for. Is that true?
No, that is not true. That is a myth. That is K-12. You are entitled to free K-12. But who isn't entitled to free K-12?
I was going to say, what are people paying for? Right?
We're taking over the Department of Education, so soon we won't be. But, yeah. So
we pay the same tuition, and we have to rely on our tribes. A lot of our tribes have scholarship programs. Most of our tribes are not wealthy. They do not have enough to give all of us enough money to cover tuition. They're pretty modest scholarships when they're available. And even so, their timeline for submitting scholarships often doesn't align with the deadline for tuition payments. And so Native students are often very tied up and caught up in financial aid because their scholarships come in late, or the way that they count Native scholarships takes away from student loans that they can take. And so if they're eligible for loans, then all of a sudden they get less loans if they have Native scholarships coming in. And it's not enough to cover everything. But it's just like, well, ask your parents. Like, well, our parents don't have that money. So what are we supposed to do? So a lot of Native students drop out of college with tremendous debt. And it is a big problem.
You know, I don't know if you were here or you remember, but I created a scholarship, the Dawn D. Bennett Alexander Building Bridges Scholarship for the university for students who were involved in trying to build bridges of understanding, whatever that was. And I have nothing to do with who's chosen for them. I'm just notified, usually through Student Affairs or the MSP office, when they've chosen them. And then they arrange for us to have dinner. And you know how delighted I was when one of the winners of the scholarship was someone who had started, it was a young woman who had started the Native American Student Association. Now I'm wondering whether that was successful or not. I was absolutely delighted to have that happen. But I don't know if it was the one you said ended up doing something that, you know, was not meeting the needs of the Native students. But I can sure check on it.
Yeah. I mean, that was a wild time when she was trying to get started, because you have to have a minimum number of students to start a student org and also to keep it live. And most of us were grad students, so we didn't count. So she needed undergrads to serve as in positions like president, vice president, etc. And so she was struggling and trying to find enough people to do it. And it was a very big passion project of hers, which is awesome. And then she got this letter one day, this email that she shared with me from a group of non-Native students who were another student org. They said, hey, because she and I, the Native student and I, were often interviewed for like the campus paper or something as like the Indians on campus. So they had seen something that she had been in the paper about. And they said, hey, we saw that you're a Native student on campus. Just so you know, we started a Native student organization called Teepee Raisers. None of us are Native, but we went to South Dakota to the Pine Ridge Reservation for a charity thing. And now we wanted to have a Native student club. You want to join us? It was just the most.
Instead of them wanting to join hers, you have to always with them.
Yeah, they wanted to. They needed her to be their like token Indian to validate their Native American student club. That had nothing to do with Native students.
You are not serious. They were not Native American students, but they had started a Native American student club. I love their heart of wanting to do something, but seriously.
Wait, the name of it, the Teepee Raisers?
Teepee Raisers, which is related to the tribe they visited in South Dakota. It has nothing to do with tribes in the South. Does
it have anything to do with racers or razors? Is it razor or racers?
Race, like raising a teepee.
Or raising. Teepee
raising. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they'd even said like a very not intentional, but direct microaggression in the email was like, P.S. I'm not Native American, but I like fry bread, so therefore I must be like 1/16th, right?
Okay.
It's like,
and I want people not to miss that you were in South Dakota originally and got pushed back. You were now then in Georgia and got the same kind of reaction. I don't want people to miss that it's not just one place that has the misconceptions about it. I mean, Georgia was famous for Cherokees being there, right? I mean, before removal. And South Dakota, I mean, you have a whole history around Native American issues and stuff. It doesn't matter because of the way society paints that and has historically dealt with those issues. Wherever you are, you end up feeling, except, with your groups, almost like an outsider because of the lack of information that people have, really impacts your quality of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be pretty constant. Like I remember, just going to get lunch at the student union at the lunch counter or whatever at Georgia. Yep. And I happened to be wearing some beaded jewelry. And the person checking me out was like, oh, are you Indian? Oh, did you make that? And just start going off. And it's like, oh, damn it. Like, I'm just trying to get lunch. But the minute anyone knew that I was Native, it was immediately, I was this like exotic unicorn. They wanted to ask all these really wild questions. It was ignorant based. Like, it wasn't intentional. Yeah. They weren't trying to hurt me. It was just, they didn't know. But it was just like, how do you ask questions? Like, how do you not know? Like, it's just baffling. Like, how am I as a Native American exotic in my own land? It's like, what?
Yeah, but that's because of lack of information. And it happened to me. We lived in Winslow, Arizona, and that's right in the middle of Hopi Nation. And I had never been or lived in a nation, Native American nation, and I got my eyes were wide open because there were some things that I was told by people that was just so degrading, and the terms and the things that they say about people are so wide sweeping that everybody's no one's worthy. But in the area that I lived in, and let me tell you, Winslow had one stoplight, so. It's a very small community. In the area I lived, where we were staying, all of my neighbors were Hopi. So what do I look like trying to tell them to do what I do, what my things are, What I enjoyed about that was the learning, the education I got from people. And then some of the things that people were telling me that was degrading now made sense why they would say those things. I just thought it was, and the biggest one was being the alcoholism. So, that was, it's already hard enough when people are having these kind of issues, right? You know, people have family members, people have whether it's alcohol or drugs or something that is addictive to that person is already a problem within your own house, right? The whole city is being painted or tainted with this, you know, I guess there is some history around alcoholism, but it's not enough. It's not a everyone thing. But
Renee,
that's how they.
Those statements were being made, those broad statements that were being made about the Hopi by people that, okay. And that was in their community.
No. Yeah, and they live there. So they see it every day, like I was seeing people every day. I couldn't understand why their vision for with the people they live around was so completely different than mine. I mean, I saw, you know, if I see somebody who is, let's just say drunk, not that I even had to see all that, but if I saw someone was drunk and needed help, that would be my first thing. It's about help, not see how they do. That's how they go. That's how they are. Mm-hmm. And it happens, you know, in the Black neighborhoods, Black communities too. It's the same thing. Everybody's a gangster. Everybody is, you know, some kind of a woman who's scorned. You know, everything, all of the things that they want to call us. But I had never lived actually amongst people who are Indigenous, and it was offensive to me. You know, because at first I'm hearing it, I don't know anything about it, but then later I'm friends, and now it becomes offensive to me. And that's the way I think, you know, people should approach things that way a little differently.
Mm-hmm. Which, Cori, how would you, and this again is for people who are watching, who want to be able to do something that they feel addresses the issues that you're bringing up in a way that is for them in their everyday life. If they saw the jewelry, let's just take that example in the line. Do you want them not to say anything at all? Do you want them to just say, oh, nice jewelry? How would they have handled that for you that would not have made you feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think just saying, yeah, that's beautiful. If you admire it, say it's beautiful. You know, I might have made it, a family member might have made it. That's a nice compliment, but maybe stop there unless you know what you're talking about. You know, a lot of Native folks will see someone wearing beaded jewelry and say, oh, who made that? Because they may know them, they want to hear the story behind it, whatnot. So that's a common question, but if you have no context whatsoever, just if you think it's beautiful, say it's beautiful.
Yeah. And the reason it's important to bring our attention to that is because we know the egos, right? And people will say, well, she was just giving them a compliment. She was just talking about her jewelry. And we want them to understand the deeper implications of treating somebody as if they're not just another human being, but that somehow they have to fit into this, like you said, a unicorn. There's some exotic thing. And it's like, you're not trying to be exotic. You're not trying to be a unicorn. You just want to be a human being. Can we get to that? Yeah. Is this the way you would treat another human being that you admire jewelry on? You know, and we get that the thought process, and this is a really important piece, we get that the thought process, given what our acculturation is and how this issue has been treated in society, we get that that might be the first thing you think of. But everything you think of doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come out of your mouth.
Yeah.
You have to think of who's on the receiving end of that and how it would make them feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you don't, when someone starts in saying stuff, whatever direction they go with it, you have that moment of, oh shit, here we go. And like you tense up, like, what are they going to say? Where's this going to go? And like, it's an emotional like response. And some people, might be fight or flight type of response, whatever it is. It could be like, oh, here goes the third one this week. Now what, and that's it. Even if it goes nowhere, sometimes you're creating something in someone you don't even know. And that just seems innocent to you. Like I remember one time I was getting my teeth cleaned at the university dentist office, and the person cleaning my teeth was looking at my chart and sees that I'm Native, and then takes that as license to start asking all kinds of questions that they have no business asking me. It has nothing to do with my health or my teeth. For instance, they stopped long enough out of my mouth so I could respond to say, they said, I don't know what the whole issue is with mascots, with Atlanta Braves. Like, why is that such a problem? Do you have a problem with that?
Why did they ask you that way, girl, after what you did in class?
What happened? Pray tell.
Well,
one of my favorite student stories.
well, let me tell you the rest of this one. I started out of my mouth saying, well, I disagree. She was waiting for me to say, oh yeah, that's so dumb. She wanted me to agree with her so that she could go on thinking that it's fine, but I didn't. I said, oh no, mascots are terrible. And this is why. Instruments back in my mouth. Stop me mid-sentence and goes on.
You're trying to get into clean. Right? You have to get into a discussion in the midst of that about mascots. Renee, we were talking about that issue. We were talking about that issue in employment law one day, and it's a graduate and undergraduate level course, and Cori was in there as a grad student. And it's important for us to talk about these things because what drives whatever's in your head is what you're going to take into a workplace. And my job is to make you avoid the kinds of things, saying the kind of things at work that will get you in trouble for violating Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So the discussions are really important because they bring out what it is that people are thinking. And because Atlanta, a lot of the students at the university are from Atlanta, this held special resonance for them because it was the Atlanta Braves. And we went on and on and on. Cori didn't say a lot. And it finally got to the point where it was kind of going back and forth. And somebody said something about, they had grown up going with their dad to games and stuff. And they were just so used to, cheering for the Braves or whatever. I guess it was the Braves. And they just couldn't understand the issue. And I mean, we had talked about it for a while. And finally, it was time for class to end. So I dismissed them. And somebody sort of left with, I just don't understand what the issue is. And Cori, who just hadn't said a whole lot the whole time, right? Finally just said, but she had explained why it was problematic. Just finally said, it's just fucked up. All the rest of those words, this is what your takeaway is.
4 words. They shut it down. Sometimes you just gotta come in. Apparently a whole hour of class, nobody could figure this shit out. So yeah. It's just fucked up.
And, she's just always so calm and so peaceful, and she just says what she has to say. And then I just sort of wasn't expecting that one, as the sort of takeaway from all of this, although I totally agree. But oh my God. And here it is years later, and I'm still laughing about it. Because you graduated in what, 18 or 19?
2018.
2018, yeah. And here it is, 2025. And I did after thousands of students, and I still have not forgotten that one. And everybody, I mean, you could see it was like, oh, between who said it and what she said, it was like, oh, okay. Now we understand.
I mean, why don't we name it the Washington pedophiles?
Ooh,
it's just a name, right?
Really.
It's just a name. What's the problem? Yeah, I don't understand. Call it the Washington lawbreakers. I mean,
or felons.
Yeah. How about that? Presidential felons. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, the money laundering.
Yeah, really. Money stealers after everybody could get thrown off of whatever with the new bill that was passed July 4th. If you could walk away with one thing you wanted people to know that you think would help them be able to both understand the issues, even though we understand they're vast and complex, as well as know how they could use this in their everyday life, what would it be? Is that a question you feel like you can answer? I know it's got a lot of pieces to it, especially given your experience, but
I think the main takeaway that could be helpful is to listen directly to Native people, talk about their needs and wants and experiences and hopes and dreams, and not take other people's word for it. Because for too long, anything that's ever been written about Native people or anything that's been created in the media about Native people have always been by non-Native, usually white folks who don't have it right. They can only write from their lens and their worldview and their experience, but Native folks can speak for ourselves, and we do. And we have done so much in the space of writing and publishing and creating videos and media. Like there's so much really amazing stuff out there by Native people that non-Native people don't know about because they're not looking for us. They're looking for the easy clickbait kind of stuff or the original writings about us, which were not by us, and they're just interpretations that usually aren't fully correct. And I've always said that in all of my higher ed spaces, if you want to learn about Native folks, make sure you're reading works by Native people, and you will know that the first, how would I know if it's written? We will insert in there one way or another somewhere what tribe we are from. We will. Mm-hmm. And so if you see that it's a person who by their name at the top of the article that says their tribe or somewhere in their introduction or their biography, we will put it in there because we want you to know this is written by an actual Native person who actually knows what we're talking about. So listen to us and don't always go to us and ask for like, oh, can you tell me everything I need to know about Native people? Because we're not paid to do that. That's not our job. I don't know everything about every Native tribe. I know my experience and the tribes that I've been connected to. But
and the only reason I know everything about white people is because you make me.
Right. So, right. Yeah. But there's like, spend the time and the energy to go see what's already been written out there by us, and learn there.
It's just beautiful. If you just go through that, I tell everyone, take 40 across the country because you are going to see, it's going to go from, with all this, a lot of congestion. If you go from east to west and it's just much more open, it just starts getting more and more open. And New Mexico is like the beginning of that. And all the way through Arizona, some part of California. But you said something earlier that made me think about this. So you as the Rosa Parks beneficiary or you got a scholarship or an award, from the Rosa Parks Foundation?
No, it's the University of South Dakota's Rosa Parks Award.
Okay. And that was in your undergrad? Mm-hmm. And what was your why did you feel like that was a award that I'm saying it wrong. What does it feel to be honored by that type of award? What does it mean to you?
It meant so much to me when I got that award. I think it's for diversity work on campus, essentially Rosa Parks Award. And it was awarded to me by our chief diversity officer at the time, who was our very first chief diversity officer, a Black man who was like, at that university to have a prominent Black male person in administration was a big deal. And he had his struggles there as well. Like his office was in the broom closet for a long time. We were partners in the work of trying to create spaces for BIPOC students and students of marginalized identities on campus. And for that award to come from him, who felt like an uncle to me, like that was like, I remember I cried. It was a big surprise and I cried. And it was so meaningful to be seen and recognized for trying to do something good for my institution, as opposed to as being that troublemaker. That like, oh, here she comes again, gonna be making a bunch of noise about something again, and we're just gonna wait her out till she graduates, But he saw me. Yeah, that was very.
That's so exciting. Yeah, I think that when you said earlier about when you started to build more kindred spirit at University of Georgia, once you got around people who were of color, and that, of course, was because you went into the higher education department, but that was, to me, I feel that a lot too when I have different groups I become part of, because we have shared backgrounds, we have shared values, ethics, all the things that make you want to have community. Also, our history. We have a lot of history with the Native American population, and it's very rich. So a lot of us believe that we're already Indian. Those are the words we used to say when we were growing up. Why? Because everybody has Indian. That's what we used to say growing up. And so But I think in my family, we actually had some reality there. So Antoine can speak to it better than me.
Girl, you don't even want me to talk about it. I was so damn disappointed when I got those 23andMe results and it showed I did not. What? Like, how can that be? That was part of our family story. I guess the people who were together didn't have any children.
It is a common part of a lot of people's story, but both Black and white folks have that family story. And for for very specific reasons that aren't, articulated now. But for Black folks who were in danger to slavery, if they could prove that they're Native American, then maybe that can save them and save their families from slavery. And so, of course, they wanted to be connected to Native folks. And also there were tribes that did welcome Black folks and African folks to be with them and to help them escape slavery. And also there were tribes who engaged in slavery. So it's a very contentious thing for white folks, especially white folks from the South. It is part of their trying to say, no, my family's been here so long that we have Native blood in our family. Therefore, this is our country. And so,
well, I just heard someone say that too. We just heard someone say that on TV that white people are indigenous to this country.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, since when did that happen?
It's been going on a long time.
Well, I mean, they do think you're indigenous, and that whole thing back to education again. We're teaching people that there was no contribution from the others. These people are just here. We're supporting them all the time with all of our programs and government. So that's why they're here. Otherwise, they don't have a connection. They don't have any connection to this earth, this land. That is something that can be quantified, and that is, so of course we know that's not true. But that's the propaganda that's being pushed right now, so that we can make it so people will believe that this is their land, they were entitled to it. And so if we take it from you, we're just taking back what's ours. And that's a lot of fun.
Convoluted, self-serving explanation. Oh my God.
But always the same explanation. All the histories down, all the countries that people they've taken over, it's the same explanation everywhere. They don't know how to take care of themselves. So we have to take care of themselves. And this land that they have, they're not even using it the way they should be using it. So we're just going to go ahead and take the land and all of your artifacts. Oh yeah, those are not something that you have been able to keep care of. You see the chip here? This means that you can't take care of your artifacts. So we'll just take it all in and consider that part of our wealth. And when you want it back, we'll decide whether you have it back or not. Depends on how you have it.
Did you read this morning that Pennsylvania has shut down, its Pennsylvania Museum has shut down its Native American section because of the law it was actually a Republican law that was passed in 1990 and got really heavily reformed in 2024 that says that they have to give back the artifacts and the skeletal remains. So they've shut down their whole thing, saying we need to go through this and see what belongs where. And it's such a big part of our history until we just have to figure out what to do. But then there are many states who have said, or museums and stuff who have said, we're not doing that. I'm like, wait a minute, this is a federal law. And I know there are like 574 federally recognized tribes and another 400 to 500 that are not recognized. And it might be a little bit different or difficult to figure out where they belong.
Where it goes, right.
What did you say? Listen to us. We would know. You may not. We may have more that we can contribute and tell you this. And instead of, and in 1800s, the federal government actually, and many private museums and institutions and stuff, urged people to go out and raid those Native American sites of whatever they thought might be of interest. And they did. And now the repatriation time has come, and folks are saying, not doing it. What? It's federal law. And look at how you have an administration that ignores the law. And how can you say you can't ignore the law? It's like, you mean like you ignore the law?
Right.
You do. You don't like the law? Don't obey it.
Right. And the same thing in Europe. They don't want to give back the artifacts and jewels. Yeah. So I don't know when it will ever turn. Because even when it wasn't the situation that we're in today in 2025, it was always still the battle of, I want my history. Just as much as you want yours, I want mine. And I don't want you telling me what it is. I can tell you if you'll listen, but you mostly don't want to listen to that. So, stop with the pressure and the disrespect. Because what happens.
I would love to think, Renee, that in 2025, because we do know better, because there is a recognition, because as far back as 1990, you had a law saying give that stuff back, that we would have lived that and said, okay, you know better, you do better. Mm-hmm. And where do we find ourselves instead? Retrenching stuff. Mm-hmm. And your story, Cori, is such an incredible example of why we need it, because people shouldn't have to go through what you went through, especially given that it's just human dignity that we're talking about and inclusion. They shouldn't have to go through that just to get higher education. There's enough problems with Native Americans getting into higher education in the first place, right? Their enrollment numbers are some of the lowest. Their retention rates are some of the lowest, and you recognize that and what some of those factors that fed into it, and were able to do a 300% increase just in 1 year, just by caring about people. So it's not like we don't know what the answers are, right? And as it turns out, we're doing sort of a retrenchment about that when that problem still exists. Why would you want that problem to exist? Especially if you think that those communities don't have the kind of resources, they're not progressing the way you think that's appropriate for them to progress. Why wouldn't you want people in those communities that could help with that progress? Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make sense.
You don't want the progress. And whatever dollars, and it's interesting when you pass these laws, because usually they come with some kind of funding. They never seem to make it to where it's supposed to go. So that's why we keep these things under wraps. We don't want to talk about these different laws or statutes that are policies or something that's been put in place that you have to have a real response to. And we're just going to go ahead and keep acting like it's nothing. And now I don't know. I think we have to, the thing I always say is that we have to find community within each other, because if we don't, we are going to lose each other. And I would rather figure out how to learn all about the Seneca people and live amongst them than to say, I want them gone. Just pick them up, throw them out, I want the land too. I mean, I don't understand. For me, it's just very, it's very white of them.
Don't you love it that you can't even form that thought, that it just makes no sense to you whatsoever that somebody would ever think that? No less make it into a government policy. Literally pay for scalps. One price for grown-ups, one price for adult males, one price for adult females, one price for children. I don't understand. And I'm so glad I don't understand. That's crazy. I don't want a mind that can understand that.
Yeah, I agree. So if you have, do you have a call to action that we can express to our listeners or watchers for continuing the story and continuing following something that will give them some more insight on what it is that you're doing and how they can be effective?
And if you've got resources, please give them to us, because we can put it in for people to be able to use to do what you were talking about. For instance, do it on your own. Don't ask me. Okay, that's my job.
Yeah, I have several books I could offer as great resources, specifically in the higher ed space, supporting Native American students. That would be my suggestion to folks, is to find the Native folks that are doing great work, whether they're at the same institutions as them, or if they're nonprofits that are in their community, and find ways to support them. And find out what it is that they do. What do they care about? What are their goals? What are their barriers? And what do you have that you can offer that could be supportive? Is it your time? Is it your money? Is it your spreading the word about the great work that they do? How can you support? And ask them. Be careful to assume that you know what's best, how you can support them, but ask them what support they need and see how that aligns with what you can do. And sometimes that's just sharing their stuff on your social media to help them get the word out. Sometimes it's speaking up on their behalf when they're not being heard by people that need to hear them. There's a lot of ways to support the Native arts, education, all activist spaces. There's all kinds of places that Native people are really active, but we're just not known by non-Native folks. So by looking for those places that we are, and we're doing great things in your own communities, or nearby, or across the country that, are doing great work that extends well beyond their location. Yeah. Think about ways to be supportive.
That's great. And thank you. That's also good information for me, because as we started out talking about you being from Houston, then you can give me some leads on what, if you still have those kind of connections. I'm assuming that you still have those connections, but you could give me some things that are places, groups to join. That would be great. I'm looking forward to learning more. In the Houston area, and let me just say why. In the Houston area, we have a large population of Haitians, a large population of Nigerians, and a large population of people who speak Spanish from wherever. And then you have your African American group as well. But Houston is the only place in Texas, besides I like Austin, that I really like, because it has the different cultures are just combined, and apparently we can get along too. Imagine that. So if there's something else, another group that I could learn from and get more insight on, I'm all for it.
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's groups. I know there's tribes in Texas, and there are definitely opportunities to learn about them and get connected with them. I don't know of the specific ones, but I'm sure there are. So I know that there's tribes in that area.
In other words, do your work.
Absolutely.
You want to ask her some questions, Renee?
I do. So we ask some questions that are to wrap it up, so people can get to know you just a little bit more. What's your favorite color?
Oh, purple, I think. I always go back and forth between purple and blue. But I'll say purple today, even though I'm wearing blue.
It's a purpley blue from the looks of it.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of my favorite color too. And what is your favorite movie?
Oh, shoot. Favorite movie. Oh, that's so hard. What is a favorite movie? Trying to think of what I've seen recently. There was one. Oh, I might have to Google it really quickly to remember the full title. Is it called Antoine Fisher? Yes. Antoine Fisher. That was a very moving movie, because my mom was adopted and removed from her family and her community. And so watching Antoine Fisher's story of meeting his family, his biological family, and the whole process he went through around it was very, very moving, because it was before we met our biological family. And it was this big dream of meeting our family and not knowing how to find them and all this. It was that was a very powerful story, especially at that time in our family history.
Can imagine. That's a good movie. And it makes you feel for people who are going through the same thing, who are still trying to find families.
Yeah.
So if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Oh, anywhere that has beautiful white sand beaches. Oh, honestly, I haven't traveled outside of this continent. So I would just love to get to another continent and just see more parts of the world. I don't even necessarily care where.
That's easy.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I like beaches if they're looking like the one I went to in the Grill, where you can see your feet when you're and your legs and your body under the water, because it's so clean. I grew up in California and also in Maryland and the coastal states, and it's just, I don't know why anybody would go there. They're nasty. Black water.
Especially after you've seen what's possible. Right. I mean, when you've seen those blue waters or looking at your feet in the water, It's like amazing. Why would I ever do that? And you know what was really interesting is I don't remember what it was, but we had some sort of event that impacted the East Coast, and that happened to the waters. And I didn't know that was possible. I thought they were always going to be brown, right? Only the waters were crystal clear, not in Florida, but up on the East Coast. And I thought, oh my God, look at what's possible and what we've done.
Yeah. That's why you should, people talking about environment stuff, they really pay attention to really what the environment looks like when it is us what we're doing.
The natives keep trying to tell you.
Yeah.
What they come with.
Right. Exactly.
Respect the earth.
Your boat came over here, it was blue water. Now it's not. Anyway, thank you so much, Cori. I really, it's a pleasure meeting you. I'm just very happy that we got to talk with you today and that you gave us some time and told us about your story.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just honored to be in your presence, the both of you.
Oh my gosh, what a wonder. Keep up the good work. I love it.